and we're talking today with Eric Lingen from the Spirit World Centre. Eric educates people from all around the world about the spirit ecosystem that we live amongst. He works alongside spirits and elementals on a daily basis. He shares his experiences with the upward spiral of fear in home hauntings. He also expresses his thoughts on the rights of spirits and so much more. So sit back as we get into our interview with Eric. Hello and welcome to everybody who's here with us today. I have Eric here from the Spirit World Centre. Welcome, Eric.
Hello, it's wonderful to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm very excited to be speaking to someone who aligns with the way I think about the paranormal, the way I think about the spirits. Eric, would you like to tell us a little bit about your background, who you are, what you do, and why you have this website called the Spirit World Centre?
Certainly. So at the Spirit World Center, my wife Lauva and myself, we teach spirit communication in all of its forms. And so we teach what we call the three pillars. There's spiritual receptivity, which is mediumship, intuitive development, and that sort of milieu where you're basically here in the 3D world, but you're inviting those messages from the spirits to come to you. And then we have spirit work, which is engaging in sacred ceremony and creating a relationship with the spirits and your guides in this 3D world. And then the third part is trance journeying, which a lot of people might know this from as shamanic journeying or astral travel or the gateway method of Robert Monroe. It has a lot of forms and it's taken a lot of forms over the years, but that is entering into a trance and then sending your consciousness elsewhere into the spirit world where it can then have these communications. And I find also that when you are in that liminal state, when you're on the other side with your consciousness, you're a lot more pliable or malleable. And so a big part of the shamanic experience is that they can remake your entire being and your energetic system at a very deep way, right? So if you're looking for spiritual change, let's say you want more courage, go on a trance journey. And a big part of the shamanic experience, once again, is, having this sense that this vision that the spirits like just completely deconstruct your body, right? And then build you up in a new and improved form. So that is the trance journeying part. So altogether, all those three, when they come together, it's a very, very powerful experience.
Sounds
And
amazing.
and I just want to add that the reason we started the center is because about 5 or 6 years ago now, Lauva and myself, we had a possession event where Lauva was completely possessed out of nowhere. And it was something of an initiation event, actually, in that it was almost a mock possession. It was one of her guides who came through and kind of initiated us into that. But the intention of it was to scare the heck out of us and kind of make us prove our mettle, that we wouldn't run kicking and screaming from working with the spirit world after seeing what's possible. And so, of course, we didn't know it was her guides that had done it yet after that happened. But we basically doubled down. We said, okay, that was incredible. And we have to figure out what is going on here, because obviously, yes, there's negative stuff out there that you need to learn how to prevent and work with if it comes to you. But at the same time, clearly there's so many more levels of positive spirit communication and interaction that are out there. So we doubled down. We could have burned all our spiritual books and run off. I could have joined a monastery. Lauva could have joined a nunnery, and we would have never touched this stuff again, right? But instead, we doubled down. And what we found after that initiation, what was later revealed to us to be an initiation, was that we went around to the shamanic practitioners that Lauva had worked with, many of them coming from the core shamanism school of Michael Harner. And there's a number of ways that whole tradition has developed. Often, absolutely includes spirits, and people are very comfortable with working with spirits. But what we found with three different practitioners was that they'd adopted this Jungian archetypal way of seeing spirits. So this is all just part of your subconscious mind. And so we had these practitioners saying, "Oh, this possession event, that was probably some deep-seated anger or some repressed part of yourself coming up." And our response to that was, no, 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 no. That was something very external and very real. And we actually then, in our studies and in our practice, then we created the Spirit World Center as a haven for people who have had those types of paranormal experiences and are practitioners and are looking at how to work with or figure out what's happened to them. A safe space where, for instance, we started predominantly with shamanism in the center. And so we started off by calling it spirit-based shamanism, so that people who have had paranormal experiences know that they can come to us, and it's like, it's spirit-based. It sounds like an oxymoron, right? That all shamanism should be spirit-based, but we wanted to make that distinction so that people would know, no, we take spirits very seriously. We will believe your story, and we'll teach you how to work with what has actually happened. So that was a big impetus for why we created the Spirit World Center.
Sounds amazing. You work very along the same lines that I do when it comes to understanding what is around us. The world is just not this 3D reality with all the things you can touch, see, feel, taste. There are other things out there. There is other energy out there, and it's being able to define the difference. I do a lot of teaching people about the difference between what is maybe your spirit or your high vibrational and what is lower vibrational, because there's a very defined difference once you know. So do you find that you get a lot of the lower vibrational or the darker energies coming in and observing what you're doing?
I feel that we have such a good connection with our positive spiritual guides that we have good bouncers at the door. We
Yeah, yeah.
At first, we had to do a lot of protective stuff. I mean, Lauva, she's an incredible trance channel and very open. And so if we went to, any place that sells used stuff, used bookstore or used clothing store, an antique store, we would like be getting into fights the next day, and it's like, what is happening? And then we'd realize, wait, we didn't put on any protection before going in there, and we didn't cleanse when we left. And ultimately, I find that it's like we're in the middle, it's literally like we're in the midst of a spiritual ecosystem. Of course, it's hidden from us unless you have second sight or seeing across that veil, but it's there. And so it's a lot like, I find spiritual practice, or even living within a world with spirit communication, it's a lot like living alongside nature. In the ecosystem that we live in, you can go in the woods and there's lots of wonderful, benign or kind or neutral spirits or beings. You have the squirrels, you have the trees, you have the mycology, the mushrooms, right? But then, there's negative things. There's the nasties. There's mosquitoes, or there's leeches if you go in the lake. And so you don't have to say, oh, I'm never going to go in the woods because there's bad stuff out there. Instead, you can just say, look, I know if I go in the woods, I wear some bug spray so I don't get the mosquitoes. And if I go in the lake and I pick up a leech, I know how to remove it. I know how to take care of it. It's just like an attachment, right? And so ultimately, I find, yeah, we live in this spiritual ecosystem. There's so many wonderful things to connect with. And the important thing is, look, if you encounter something negative, you know how to deal with it, and you can deal with it, right? We're beings of light in these meat suits that we're living in. So we can absolutely have the power, the right, and the ability to deal with anything that comes along. We just have to believe in ourselves and do what we need to do when it comes to that. And of course, one of the biggest issues is believing that you can do it, right? So many people are conditioned to feel that they need to turn to an external source in order to have that, a human external source, a priest or some intermediary. But in fact, there's so many things that the lay person can do in order to protect themselves. And it's really just, compiling your own catalog of practices that resonate with you that you can do, and you can stay completely safe while engaging with this spiritual ecosystem.
Absolutely right. I'm all about educating people about why dark energy beings are here. They're part of this ecosystem. If you've got light, you've got to have dark. If you've got hot, you've
Hmm.
got cold. It is just the way it is. So once you take the fear out of why these beings are here and what they're doing and what their signs and symptoms are when they're around, people go, really? Is that all they are? Because we've been conditioned by certain groups, I'll call them, in society to fear the dark because it creates fear, paranoia, anxiety, distress, and all these emotions create a vibration, and the vibrations attract to us. It's like the law of attraction, so it's just one of those things. And what you're saying about believing, that is absolutely spot on, but you've got to trust the process as well. You've got to trust it, because if you don't trust it, it's not going to work.
Absolutely. That belief, and then you have the will and intention. If you can believe, and if you can really, you can't just say, you can't not have a real strong intention and just read words off a page. That's not going to do anything, right? You got to, if you read, let's say, an exorcism, although that's not really what I'm getting at, but if you read something off a piece of paper that you've got, such as, spirits leave this house, if you just read it and you don't feel it, if you don't have that strong intention that this is what I'm intending, this is what I'm willing,
Yep.
then it doesn't really do anything. But if you have that will and intention behind those words, that power, absolutely, you can do absolutely anything with it. It's incredibly powerful. And yeah, fear, as you're saying, is absolutely the enemy in this practice. It can really cause things to go haywire. I like to talk about what I call the upward spiral of fear in a haunting. And I find that spirits, they often, especially negative ones, they need our energy in order to do things in this world. And so one of the easiest energies they can get from us is fear. That you could also empower them with love or reverence or anything like that. But if you're a negative energy or entity, it's easiest to get fear from someone. And so often in a haunting, it's almost like an investment scheme, in that the spirit has a little bit of energy that's held on to over the years, and it uses that to cause some type of manifestation, right? Let's say a bump in the night or the sound of someone walking upstairs. And that creates a fear response from that person. Well, that energy is released, it gets eaten up by that spirit, and now that spirit is able to do even more, like, bigger things in that house. And so there's this upscaling of events going on, where it might start with, the sound of a jiggling doorknob off in the distance or some footsteps. And by the end of it, you're seeing full material manifestations, because the spirit's gotten so much fear energy from you that you can see it, and perhaps even, you can feel a push on the stairway or something, like you can. And so absolutely, you don't want to give the spirits that fear, otherwise they're going to use it against you. The response then is to be knowledgeable about the fact that, look, okay, something just caused this sound off in the distance. First off, realize, it might not be negative. It might be a positive spirit who just needs to pass over. It might be someone lost. But if you do get that sense that it is something negative, the response that really is empowering is to say, okay, I know what game you're playing over there. I'm not going to take the bait. I'm going to laugh this off. Like, you're not getting this from me, buddy. And if you give that response, there's nowhere for that spirit to go. It's just used up that energy of its own to cause that manifestation. It's in a weaker state now, and you have not replenished its store of energy. And so that's the way to end that upward spiral of fear, I find, in my experience.
That is absolutely right. So teaching people to have awareness and to stay calm, just a
Yeah.
bit calm. We've been conditioned through movies and through visual images to instantly go into the fear, the paranoia, the stress, the anxiety, all and creating all those imprints. And one of the funny things that some dark energy beings told me, because quite often I seem to be in tune with listening to what the dark and the demonic level beings, which is, I use those two words because they're just two different levels of energy. So the dark energy beings are just your light, fluffy, slightly naughty ones. The demonic level beings are the ones that they're there for the heavier imprints, the heavier trauma imprints in homes. Now, being aware and staying calm and being respectful, you just ask them to do all those things that you've just said. You don't give them any food, but also too, they know what triggers us by, moving chairs, scratching, knocking on walls, because we've been conditioned to fear that. But if you don't fear it, I had a spirit knock on my wall once. It wasn't a spirit, it was a darker energy being. I just knocked back. It knocked again. I knocked back and I said, "Are you going to do this all night? I really need to get some sleep." And away it went, because it knew it wasn't going to get the response it wanted. Now, you talk a lot about the rights of spirits. I and the listeners would really love to hear what you mean by that.
Absolutely. So what this is in response to is, you'll often be browsing Instagram or something, and on the spiritual parts of Instagram, often there's these memes of people who want to make themselves sound so tough and so empowered. And it goes something like this, "Hey, I just saw a spirit in my bedroom at 3 a.m. I threw salt at it and told it, get the hell out." And it's, I find that animosity and that adversarial approach to spirits is so harmful. I mean, it can certainly work. It can certainly work, but it it really is not respectful to the spirits themselves. In that, if we're talking about some grandmother who hasn't passed over yet, they're lost, they're confused, they might not even know they're dead, and if they do that know that they're dead, they're hanging around for some purpose, some unresolved issue. To treat them as though they are just a pest, a cockroach that you have to send away or call the exterminator, is really dehumanizing. And that leads to this idea that we really should see spirits as beings who have rights because they are former humans. And we have to kind of change the self-centeredness of who we are as humans and say, you know what? If there's a nice old grandmother living in my home and she's working her stuff out, you know what? I don't want to send her away. I mean, if she's not ready to pass over to the other side, if I send her away, she's just going to have to go to some other house and haunt there for a while. So, you know what? Maybe I can live alongside her, negotiate with her so that she doesn't cause stuff that really freaks me out. And at the same time, maybe I can help her out. Maybe I can help her resolve these unresolved issues. Maybe I can help her pass over when she's ready. So with a neutral or a positive spirit, absolutely, we can be nice and we can look at them as a roommate. I don't see any problem with saying, look, she was here before I moved in. She's not causing any harm. She's not bothering anyone. Okay, yes, there's this, my reptilian brain is getting a little freaked out when I hear her walking around in the middle of the night. But you know what? Maybe I can ask that she's not so loud when she walks around. We can live in this harmony and symbiosis with spirits if they're not causing any problems. And, okay, fine. If you run across something negative, then it's time to start with really diving into looking for solutions. And then, fine, okay, it makes sense that you're going to try to push them out or pass them over. But, you can look at it like, if you were dead and you were a spirit and you were lost or you're confused, or if you were trying to resolve issues, how would you like to be treated? Because you know what? We all might be in that situation one day. And so that's why I very much feel that we should give spirits the rights that we ourselves would wish if we were in that situation.
That is absolutely the way I think. I don't tend to work a lot with spirits because I'm very in tune with the lower vibrational beings. Sometimes I find spirits in homes, but usually the lower vibrations of beings are there because they're feeding off the
Yeah.
imprints that we've created, previous owners and so forth. I treat all energy beings, whether they're spirits, elementals, lower vibrational, cosmic, because I get some of the cosmic beings. I
Mhm.
treat them all the same. It's like we're having a conversation now. They are purely energy that doesn't have these earthy physical bodies. So you treat them all with respect. Even the darker beings, I find 85% of them, there's never 100%, there's always rebels that don't like you for some reason. Treat them with respect. The law of the universe is what you put out is what you get back. Even dark or demonic level beings that are in homes for a reason, when I enter a home, I ask permission to enter that space and I let all paranormal beings know that they're not going to be hurt or harmed in the process. They simply need to move house. Once they understand why you're there, you're not there out of ego because they can read those superficial social media egotistic people. We're not there for ego. We're there to help and assist, or we've been professionally employed to do that work. So do you find that you like to take the fear out of the paranormal for people and then they understand it? Tell us a little bit how you work with people, what sort of techniques you use to help to take the fear out of the paranormal.
I think the biggest thing is just educating them on what is going on. If all that they have seen are horror movies, then that's an issue, right? Then they're going to instantly
Yeah.
drop into that fear response.
Oh, yes.
If they, once they're educated though, and understand, you know what, this thing in your home is not negative in any way. It's just, it's doing its thing. And even if it's negative, you have the power to respond to it. That instantly causes a shift in how they relate to it. And then the other big thing that we do just to empower people is to have them connect with a guide that we like to call a guardian spirit. And it's found in a lot of different traditions, a lot of indigenous traditions, Norse traditions actually, and then also within Christianity and also the Judeo-Christian milieu, sometimes called a guardian angel, that type of thing. But that guardian spirit, it's someone watching out for you, and they're very close to you, and they are very quick to act as your own personal bouncer. So what I tell people is, look, if you don't feel that you have the tools to take care of this haunting yourself, at the very least, then just call upon your guardian spirit because they will secure the space for you, right? They'll be your own little SEAL team that goes around the house and takes care of what's going on. And then the other thing that, this is kind of harkening back to the first point, but the thing that's so important is to truly think and figure out what the situation is before you act. This is something I'm always trying to get through to people. And I have found that I have failed to do this before at certain times, and I always felt incredibly guilty when it happened. I had one situation occur where in the morning, Lauva was going out to the garage in order to take out the garbage. And when she opened the door, she felt this canine like entity or being brush by her legs and go into the garage. And this just shows that Lauva must have been in a bit of a trance state while she was going out to that garage, because we do have a dog, but it's never let out to the garage. Like, it's not allowed to get in there, right? There's too much stuff it can get into. So the very fact that she didn't, say, hey, you can't go in there, she's definitely in a trance state. Well, I went out to the garage later that day. This was actually during my early days of podcasting, and I was looking for somewhere to record that would be nice and quiet. And I get out there, look around for 5 minutes, determine, what, this isn't going to work. But as I'm looking around the room, my eyes fall upon my mountain bike in the corner. And as soon as I look at it, as soon as my gaze falls upon it, the back tire just explodes. And like, this is a dusty garage. There's a big sound. There's a shockwave of dust that comes out from it, right? And it was definitely a big explosion. And I go back in. I tell Alva. She mentions that canine like spirit that went into the garage that morning, and I let fear get the better of me. Right? I let my annoyance and that fear of like, what was that, get the better of me. And so, we cleanse the house. We say, whatever caused that, go away. You're gone. And so then we do some channeling a little bit later, and it's revealed that what actually caused that to happen was what we like to call a spirit of the land. So it's a spirit of nature, it's a spirit of the local landscape. And that it had been sent in because, we've done so much work with the spirits of the land that they've taken on a very protective role with us. And so that spirit was sent into the house in order to take care of a problem that they saw with that tire, because they were thinking, they felt that tire was going to blow. They felt like it was a ticking time bomb. And they didn't want that happening to me when I had my nightly ride later that day, because I could get hurt if I was on a busy section of the road. And so they decided to make sure that it happened earlier. And so as soon as I heard that, I felt absolutely awful. I've sent this being away. It was just trying to help. I instantly invite it back. I give it my thanks. I'm like, you know what? You can have access to the whole house. This is awesome. Please be part of our lives. I take some dog biscuits and I go put them out in the back forest as a little offering to it as thanks. And it really taught me and really solidified the understanding in me that we have to know exactly what's going on before we react. And it's natural to start off with a bit of fear. We're humans. If something happens that we can't see what did it, that brings up some initial fear. And so we have to train our minds to take a step back and say, okay, something happened, but I don't know the whole story. And so I have to investigate to find out what happened there. And this is particularly useful in one type of haunting that I have encountered before. And that is, sometimes spirits are not the bad guys in a situation. Sometimes it's the humans. And let's say you have a whole bunch of leaky paint cans in the stored behind the shed, and they're leaking, and they're adding toxins to the local environment. Well, in that situation, you can actually be haunted, in my experience, by spirits of the land. You could say nature spirits, you could say the fae or the fairies. There's a lot of different beings and types of beings I find that fall under that heading. Well, those spirits, as a defensive mode, might be coming into your home and trying to drive you out, saying, this person's no good for the local landscape here. He's hurting the land. And so in that situation, you don't want to go in there saying, okay, spirits of the land, get out. This is the human's property. In that situation, you want to have negotiation. You want to go to those spirits and say, okay, why are you doing this? Why are you causing all this mischief in the household? And they'll tell you. And once you figure it out, it's that negotiation. It's like, okay, I will remove those paint cans and make sure that they go to a good place. Are we going to be okay? And usually they'll be like, yeah, absolutely. We're cool. Just, you were causing some problems here. So absolutely understanding, know the facts before you act. That's like the number one thing. And once you do that, also you have that cool down period from that fear. And so even if it is something negative, if you are dealing with a negative spirit in the house and you just are responding in fear mode, you're not going to do it right. You're not going to take care of that situation correctly. The best way to do it is to have a calm, cool, collected mindset. And so absolutely, something happens, take a step back, try to fully comprehend what's happening in the situation, and then figure out your plan of attack. That's the number one thing to do.
Absolutely. We are so in line. I've not met anyone, and I've interviewed a few people. I speak to lots of people all the time about this. Eric, you're probably the first person that I've ever met that actually fully gets it, understands how this works. It is just amazing that there's so many of us out there that listen, that have awareness, that want to negotiate. It's not about put your battle armor on and let's get into it. It's about understanding why, because they all have jobs. I think everyone has a reason, whether they're living or not in this physical form that we're in. We all have jobs and reasons why we're here. That's fascinating. Do you have any paranormal stories that you would like to share with us about your experiences working with spirits or working with the lower vibrational beings? People love to hear relatable experiences.
Certainly, yeah, I have a couple that are good crowd pleasers. I just want to say it's wonderful to hear that what I'm talking on resonates with your practice as well. I feel like anyone who really has an open heart and really is taking the time to appreciate what's happening with these hauntings and with these situations really comes to this mindset. And so I'm so glad that you're another person who's come to this understanding and this way of seeing things. So I have two that stand out in my mind right now. One actually happened on our property, and that was that it's around 3 o'clock in the morning, and Lauva's gotten up to go to the washroom. She comes back and she wakes me up and she says, "Eric, we need to deal with something." And I'm like, "What?" It's 3 a.m., so it's a little disconcerting being woken up there. And she says, "There's a spirit in the shower." I'm like, "What?" So I go into the washroom and I basically just stand by the sink, and Lauva goes over to the shower to interact with whatever is there. And it seemed to be a spirit. She got the sense that it was a young woman who had passed away maybe 100 years ago within the local area, and that she had spent a lot of time in the forest and such, so she was very comfortable with the area that our property is on. And so she'd passed away, and she was very kind of scared, but she really liked the shower because it was this small enclosed space that she could snuggle up in and be comfortable. And so we, of course, Lauva, helped her over to the other side and gave her that guidance. But as she was interacting with the spirit, Lauva, she's not seeing something with her physical eyes. She's seeing it in her mind's eye, in her third eye. And as she's interacting with this young lady, she puts out her hands. She offers her hands, and the spirit actually touched Lauva's hands. She took Lauva's hands, and Lauva said it was the most unbelievable sensation because there was this amazing wave of cold and tingling that came to her hands. And the cold, I very much feel, is the fact that these spirits, they need energy to do things. And so when they encounter a human, they can be very cold because they're literally sucking up that energy, right? And so that's that heat differential that can cause that sensation of cold. But yeah, it was such an intense moment for Lauva that she literally started crying in that moment because she really just felt that touch of that spirit in it for a sustained length of time. So that was quite amazing. The other experience that comes to mind that your listeners might enjoy is we do a lot of channeling. And so Lauva, she becomes the vessel, right? She allows the spirit to come through her and to talk through her and even to move around in her body. Definitely, an advanced form of mediumship. And Lauva, she's just a natural at it. It's been great. And what happened once is that we were connecting with actually some spirits of the land from the backyard. And so I'm talking with them through lava, and it was the oddest experience because all they would say is me. It sounded like Beaker from the Muppets. And eventually, and that's all it would say, like the entire communication. It was just, but then I handed it a pen and some paper, and it started drawing the yard, and it started to draw like these paths through the property. And I got the sense, okay, this is some type of fairy-like being that is living in the local area. So definitely got that fairy sense from them. Now, the other thing that was revealed in that channeling session is that they lived in this, we have this big cliffside and valley in the backyard, and there's these big boulders, like tons of big boulders on this big ridge, and they were communicating through what they were drawing that they lived in those boulders, they lived in the crevices of those boulders. And so, okay, I walk away from the channeling session with that idea. They are fairies that live in the backyard. They like to say Mimi, and they live in the crevices of boulders. Okay, about a month later, I'm on Google, and I'm thinking, I wonder if anyone's ever had experiences with with fairies that like to say Mimi and live in boulders. Well, I look it up on Google, and the first result actually comes from Australia. And it's on Wikipedia. I click through, and it's like, okay, Mimis are the local, amongst the local indigenous people, are fairies that live in the crevices of rocks and boulders and live in Australia. And I'm like, okay, I guess we have a
Wow.
colony of them here. It was incredible, the synchronicity. That was a wonderful confirmation event. It's like, okay, I guess this stuff is happening. And it was such the weirdest channeling event ever, because it's just like me. They're very cute. I gotta say that. Yeah.
That is fascinating. That is absolutely fascinating. I've never come across the Mimi people before. I've dealt with gnomes, though. I call them gnomes, like your traditional type gnome. Quite
Mhm.
often they don't wear pants, but they have long shirts on and red pointy hats, and they like to live in people's homes. They like the treasure troves of junk rooms and storage rooms. And if you go in and you disturb those rooms, look out. They go on the warpath. I've actually been kicked in the kneecap when I was doing a house clearing. There's no reason why my knee would suddenly have this really sudden pain like 3 or 4 times. And when I saw, because I will see them, I'm like, okay. And then I had to unpack why they were unhappy. And that came to a negotiation. And we worked out something with the family, and they stayed. The gnomes stayed, and the family were happy to have some little people sort of roaming around in their house. So it's fascinating the world that is around us. It is just amazing.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yes, I wouldn't mind having a home full of gnomes. Absolutely. And I find that when you get used to the sense that there's such a rich ecosystem out there, like there's just so much variety in the types of spirits that might be around. And it's really wonderful. It's like going out there and looking at different varieties of butterflies or something. There's so many different types of beings to engage with anywhere that you are. It's yeah, no, it's quite amazing. I also find that the spirits of the land, as I like to call them, but you can call them fairies, nature spirits, the dryads, and everything. It's kind of encapsulated within that term. And I find that they are absolutely fascinated by humans. That and a house is no house or an apartment building or anything is no blockage to them going in there and exploring. They look at it like just a big boulder that they can, run through and explore. And I find that, for instance, in our practice, we have a table that we've just covered in crystals and little toy houses and this type of thing. And this is the spirits of the land altar. They're invited to hang out in there. And I find it's a very powerful thing if you give them an area where they can kind of treat as a vacation home, you know, and attach some of their energies to. It really has an effect on a room or even a household if you give them that place to live. And I find even if you don't do that purposefully, like even if you don't do that consciously, often if you know have your nook that has all your plants in it, or you have your crystal collection, or you have even interesting sculptures or paintings, I find it's very easy to notice if you when you turn on your third eye that you know what there's beings already inhabiting these areas. You know, this cool painting already has somebody living in it. It really is, it just opens up so many gateways for or paths for connecting with that local spiritual ecosystem. And so yeah, as you mentioned with the gnomes and enjoying all the trinkets and everything, I find the one thing that you have to keep an eye on with the spirits of the land is just don't annoy them, obviously, but also don't for instance, if you start giving, let's say, an offering of milk once a week or something, right? It's very old Celtic tradition. And if you start giving that, do not forget, because they can act like a 5-year old having a tantrum. And you know
Mm-hmm.
they want your attention. They're like, you forgot about us. Why? You know, we're enjoying this interaction. And they could have a little fit. And so you might find that your keys go missing spontaneously, and then they, you know, show up in a place that you've looked 5 times already, you know, the next day, or they'll find some way to get your attention, right? So you want to be very uh, persistent and reliable if you create that kind of gift giving relationship. But at the same time, if you start that gift giving relationship, there's so many positive ways that can develop, right? Because they'll start to like you, and they're like, you know what, we really like this person. He's giving all these cool gifts, and we want to give back. So we're going to watch out for him. We're going to make sure that nobody messes with him. We're going to, in fact, I find that one of the best ways to guard against negative spirits coming into your household is to create a really close relationship with those spirits of the land, because they will act as your little army in keeping anything at bay. So in fact, this is something I've even got some people who've experienced hauntings to do, right? It's like, you know what, maybe you should start giving a bowl of milk once a month on the full moon, let's say. And you're going to find you create a relationship with all this ecosystem that's going to keep anything away. It's a lot like what are they called, kind of the positive, like the gut biome that you have, right? So your digestive system, it requires a lot of bacteria that are not you, but
Yeah.
that are necessary for keeping things functioning well. I look at the spirits of the land a lot the same way. That on an energetic sense, they act as this immune system that can keep anything at bay. So if they like you, they'll make sure nothing messes with you. That's something I find is also very powerful to respond to a haunting.
Before you share your second experience, your second story with us, you're going to love this. I'll keep it very short because I'm a very long-winded storyteller. I had some people contact me from the UK. They had a very lovely piece of land near Glastonbury, beautiful forests. They wanted to build a meditation centre. They had a little cabin there that they were living in, but nothing would go right. The builders wouldn't show up. The contracts would be cancelled. Everything was going wrong. When I tuned in to this land, the elementals, as I called, they weren't happy that their land was going to be renovated and changed and moved, and people were going to build things. And how dare they? This is our land. So I got this crazy idea to create a meeting negotiation stone, or a little place, like a little altar place where they could go. The people had to leave a copy of the plans that were going to be altered on the land, and they had to verbalise what they were going to do, but also leave the plans with a little offering of some biscuits and cider or something to say, look, we want to live in harmony together. Once these things were done, the builders started to turn up, the contracts turned up, the lumber and the timber and everything started to work. once these people realized that they had to work in harmony with the energy beings that were living on the land, humans can't just go in and take over a piece of land without asking first or negotiating or letting the energy beings go. And on the land, it's the same in homes. Energy beings can get upset when people renovate homes too much, but that's a story for another time. But I thought you'd find that ties in with working in harmony, working together, negotiating, creating a relationship that's really positive with the land energies.
Absolutely. This is something that we teach our students as well, that even if you're going to build a shed, something as simple as that, right? Just a little shed, just go to the spirits of the land, and you can easily intuitively speak with them, right? If you have that kind of heart-based communication open, if you have that heart open, and you're able to, you know, receive positive images or thoughts or negative images or thoughts, then just ask, okay, do you mind if I build this shed? And then just enter that receptive state. And if a picture of a flower appears in your mind, then that's a yes. It's but I love what you did there with the little negotiation table. That's amazing. Absolutely. Yeah, it's I find this is so important as well when you're out in nature. And I think we've all been there, right? You're walking through the woods and you find a stick or a rock that you really like. And something that I've found through tough experience is that you should definitely ask permission first, right? I always
Yes.
carry around, some nuts or something, so that if there's a rock I really like, first off, I can give something in return, that gifting relationship. But also I will, kneel down, put my hand on the rock or stick and branch, or the branch, and I'll ask, okay, is it okay if I take this? Because it looks like nothing to us, but we have to realize that's part of that local spiritual ecosystem. And more than not, they will tell you, absolutely, it's fine. But even the fact that you asked first is just is treating them with respect, which is a very good thing. Absolutely. We have had a couple of these aren't long stories, but they definitely get to the sense that there's a lot of different spirits in a particular ecosystem. Um, we only have a couple of acres here, but there's such a rich diversity of spiritual life, let's say, in the area. So there's spirits here that we've only seen a few times, and we get the sense that they may, in the old Celtic lore, you have these trooping fairies, right? And then you also have the kind of the solitary fairies, and even then you have this distinction where some fairies, they will live in a particular area, right? Like I think like a clurican, right? It likes to live in your cellar drinking your whiskey. Whereas the you also have spirits that kind of roam around, right? They have migratory routes, basically. Well, this one particular new moon, and I believe it was also an eclipse. I believe there was a lunar eclipse that night. Lalva goes upstairs at like 2 o'clock in the morning to go get a glass of water. And she, in this area, we have this one area in the big living room area where we have a ton of plants. Like it's a jungle, okay? Like you wouldn't believe it. We have plants that are like, touching the 8 foot tall ceiling and like 12 feet wide. It's a little jungle. But right in front of that, Lauva sees these cloaked beings. They're, in fact, it's not even like a cloak. They seem to have these wings, like these moth-like wings, that they are wrapping their front in. So they're kind of wrapping themselves up in their own wings, and they just look like they're in stasis, just under the skylight, absorbing the moonlight or absorbing the energies of the sky. And I think like there were 8 or 9 of them, and Lauva like really saw them distinctly with their third eye. Like, it wasn't just a passive image where it's like, okay, I saw something. It was like, Okay, that they were really there. Something very powerful that was just enjoying our living room that one evening, and I've yeah, we've never seen them since. But very powerful energy. So we like to Lauva calls that the Moonlight Cocoon Tribe. So
I
whatever they
love
are.
it.
And also we've had instances, for instance, when we do a lot of gardening, and we'll often go to a garden center to pick up, some sprouts or some young plants to plant. And we always find there kind of an interchange in that, or an exchange happens. Lauva, who's definitely she's the one who has the second sight in this relationship. She gets the sense that, in fact, when we're driving out to the garden center, I'll often ask, "Okay, so do we have any hitchhikers right now, or any hideaways and or stowaways?" And so we'll often find that the local spirits of the land kind of come for a little joyride, and then once they get there, it's like a student exchange program where some stay behind to be with the plants at this nursery and to be in that environment. And at the same time, then we have stowaways coming back, and so often it's this. And so sometimes in fact, sometimes we give offerings to the local spiritual ecosystem when we return, because it's kind of like bringing in an energy that isn't really part of that local spiritual ecosystem. So we don't want to upset anyone that might be like, no, they can't be here, right? So that often happens too. This almost is like the student exchange program where some of the local spirits from here stow away, go to this new place, and then some others come back. So that's our life. That's that's the weirdness that we encounter. One that happened just a few weeks ago. We were having a big bonfire in the backyard, and we were doing a lot of spiritual work with it. We were giving offerings, doing a lot of invocation, this type of thing. And there's this big hillside, there's this big ridge right behind the house that then drops off to a cliff, but it's maybe 30 feet tall or so, big ridge line. And Lauva looks up, and in her third eye, once again, she sees what looks like this tribe of these 9 foot tall, early human looking things, like Cro-Magnon or Neanderthal looking beings that are just standing up there watching. She didn't get any sense that they were negative at all, but they were just, she felt like they'd been passing through the area. And Lauva and we'd been working with a lot of energy with this offering and with what we'd been doing around the bonfire. And they were just curious. They're like, what are they doing down there? And we, in fact, in that event, we were giving offerings as well to the local spirits of the land. So I'm sure that they were getting some of that as well. So yeah, it's absolutely amazing when you open yourself up to exploring that local spiritual ecosystem, because there's so many different things out there. Even dryads, which is a type of spirit that Lauva and I actually are still trying to figure out, but that it was very prominent in Lauva's childhood. She grew up in a very haunted house, and her sister both were very spiritually aware. Her older sister was actually seeing things, like would wake up and see spirits, but Lauva, she felt them, right? And
Yep.
the way
Yep.
where this house was situated was very perfect to have a lot of spiritual energy. In fact, first off, I find that houses alongside rivers, I don't know if you've found this as well, but houses that are alongside a big river, I find tend to have a lot more energy to draw upon. And so this was right beside a big river. And then just north of that, where the river came from, is a place called Devil Lake. And there's this is in Quebec, and there's this old folk tale that sometime in the middle 1800s, there was this woman who was at a kind of what do they call it? at kind of a rural dance party, right? Got the fiddles going and everything. And she's dancing, and this mysterious stranger comes in, and he, starts to sweep her off her feet, and they
Mm.
dance. And then suddenly, and this is basically an island in the middle of this small lake, so everyone had to take rowboats to get there. And well, suddenly then she disappears. Everyone's looking around for her, and then there's this big bang and this big flash, and then suddenly she reappears on this one rock that they've now called Devil Rock. And I think there's some impression that's been left behind that people think is tied to this legend. So regardless of whether that's just a local legend or not. Oh, and actually it continues, because she then the folk tale goes that she actually had some type of spirit possession going on, which actually the Roman Catholic Church got involved with. So I haven't looked in to confirm whether this tale has actually happened or not. But as you can see, often places that have like Devil's Rock or Devil's Tower, they're places of great spiritual energy. And I think the name often comes from the fact that when the settlers get there, they can sense that something is different about this place. And so they give it a name that includes that word devil in the beginning to let people know, there's something off here. There's something different. I have no idea what's going on, but just be careful here, right? I feel like that happens a lot. So that's setting the context for where Lauva was growing up. Now, she definitely was always creeped out by her basement, right? Every time she'd go into the basement, it's this unfinished basement. She felt like there was something not right there, something that really troubled her. Now, we never got to the bottom, and especially in this one corner of the basement, which actually was 2 levels directly below her room, right? So she's on the second story. If you went straight down, she's right above that corner, and it was always unsettling to her. So we never got to the bottom of what was going on there until probably 2 years ago, when we did some channeling and did some stuff to look into that. And what we found was actually quite surprising, is that there used to be this huge tree, this big tree that was located right at the corner there, so its upper branches were where her room was, and its roots, of course, were in that area of the basement. And she got the sense that there was, for lack of a better word, a dryad, like a tree spirit or a protector of the tree that was watching over that tree in the past, and that it was still watching over that space. And so Lauva, of course, she was young. She saw something unseen. She felt something unseen. And of course, if you're in a dark basement, you're going to enter into fear mode, right?
Yep.
But it definitely doesn't seem that it was something negative. In fact, we got the sense that that being was actually watching out for Lauva in a house that did have some negative stuff going on in there, but that it was watching over her. So yeah, that's Lauva's encounter with a dryad. So, there's just such a amazing rich ecosystem out there.
I often find, because I work worldwide, people send me photos of their property. Sometimes it'll be their backyard, trees, generally the front and the back of the house. Trees will talk to you. Like, I've tuned into a local property here. It was like 5 acres, and there was this massive gum tree. And as I'm looking around where to start, because I always clear the land before I move into the house, and I'm like, whoa. And I looked at that tree and I moved on to the next photo, and the photo flipped back. And I moved on again and it flipped back, and I went, this tree has something to say. And trees often witness what goes on in the land, and not just trees, but shrubs and all plants. This tree wanted to tell me what it had seen, and for me to clear the emotions and the trauma that it had absorbed from those experiences. And I was no way allowed to work on the land or the house until I worked with a tree first. And that was fine. I go where I'm guided. You do what you're told, basically, when you're working alongside the land or with a property. But I've had that happen a few times. These massive trees, they have things to say. So who knows what that tree in the basement had experienced? Obviously, it'd been cut down. Did it have emotions it needed to release? Was it upset about something? So, yeah, it's fascinating. I'm never bored with this line of work, ever. And there's always so much to share with people. Did you have any other stories you'd like to share with us before people can understand how to contact you? Where can they find you?
Sure. Yeah, I think I have one last story to share that kind of definitely touches on what you're talking about there with the gum tree. And that is, there's so much potential for us practitioners to help the landscape. We really can help it heal, right? Whether it's a
Yep.
tree that's absorbed all this energy, and that's so common too
Yes.
for all those energies to be absorbed by a tree. In fact, one thing that I've never seen this myself, but I've heard that it happens. Have you ever heard of the concept of a king tree?
Not the wording, but I could imagine there are I'm not magnificent, it's not the word I'm trying to use, but yeah, there are trees that make their presence known, that I feel like they are the guardians, or they're the leader. So that would make them a king, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah, it's very rich in I think Southeast Asian folklore, where it's this idea that in a forest you have the biggest tree and it's the king of the trees. And I've heard a lot of practitioners in that context who do feel like that tree picks up a lot of energy, and that's not something to be messed with because it's so heavily energized by that forest. And if anything negative has happened in that forest, that can be, that can also affect the king tree. But that's the great thing about this kind of practice, is that you can really help to reclaim land where horrible things have happened. If you look at a battlefield like Gettysburg or something, there's a lot of negative stuff there, but practitioners can start to help to clear it, and to help to the land to overcome that trauma. One particular channeling event that Lauva and I had that really has always stuck with me was when we met with a nature spirit. And, terms can be clunky, but what I mean by nature spirit is, like with the Fae, you get the sense that there's these spirits of the land that kind of are living their own life, right? They're living a life of joy and beauty, and they're doing their own thing. I look at a nature spirit as a consciousness that's living within the landscape and that is directly involved with helping nature and is involved in giving power to trees, helping with these cycles of death and rebirth, and otherwise just overseeing to make sure everything goes to plan. So we met with this nature spirit, and at first it didn't have a name, right? And it actually seemed quite upset by that fact, like it was letting us down. And a very sweet spirit. It was unbelievable. And so we said, okay, well, would you like to pick a name? So it, browses Lauva's consciousness for a bit, and it decides upon the name Dust. And so I say, Dust, it's very lovely to meet you. And then it just starts begging and pleading for help. Like, will you help us? And it starts pleading in a way that, like, I just start crying uncontrollably, because it was like the land itself calling out for help. And you could see that this being was very, very upset about the encroachment of humanity and how the land was being treated. And it was just asking, will you please agree to help us? Will you do something? Nothing I can say but yes. It really was a wake-up call, and very very powerful experience. The spirit that was so distraught from what had been happening to the landscape. But I think it also highlights the importance that humans have, right? Because we do have the ability, animals don't, but we humans, we have, well, to a limited extent, but we humans have this special place where we can bring the spirit world and the physical world together. We can help to clear energies. We can understand what's going on. And so that is so important. Absolutely. It's just a wonderful, wonderful thing to do. And I encourage everyone to give it a try, because you can help the land not just through things like sustainability and being eco-minded, but you can actually get out there and heal the trauma of the landscape.
Absolutely. And in so many ways, you'll have skeptics that won't, they'll be listening today and they'll be going, no, 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 none of this is real. But yet they're going to go outside. They're going to have an experience with a tree or a plant. They'll feel something, they'll hear something, they'll see something. And it's just trusting that the plant world and the elemental world, as I call it, they want to work with us. They're not against us. They understand why we're here. It's sharing the space. It's sharing this reality together that is so, so important. So before I look at houses now, I always scour the backyards. Is there a tree? Is there something that wants to talk to me? And being in Australia, this is interesting. I don't initiate contact with First Nation elders that are in spirit. It's not something I do. But if I move onto a piece of land, I've been given permission to clear a home and a property of some issues that are there. If the First Nation elders in spirit show up, I'm like, wow, they want me to work with them through this physical reality. So in their version of reality, they'll do their clearing. They'll tell me how they want me to work, what they want me to do, because I'm in this 3D-ness. So you work as a team, and I work with your higher vibrational beings, but also the lower vibrational beings in finding a balance. But I quite often will get the First Nation elders will show up and they're like, right, we would like you to do it this way. And I'm like, absolutely, because it's about working in harmony. But it's just fascinating when they show themselves. It's not all the time. And I do a lot of Australian clearing jobs. But it's that awareness. And I think they feel that some people are more open to it, more respectful, or more aware. It's probably the spiritual awareness or the psychic awareness to know that they're there, but they're fascinating. They're just so open to working with us 3D people in this physical form. It's absolutely wonderful.
It's so true what you're saying, that we as embodied humans can do a lot of things that spirits can't, that they do their stuff on
Yep.
their side.
Yep.
But there is a huge place for us as humans to get involved in this, even within psychopomp work, right? So helping the spirits of the dead pass over. There's such a huge place for humans. And you might think, well, why don't the spirits just have it so that, someone automatically passes over to the other side and humans don't have to get involved? Well, there's so many. For instance, one reason that I feel is because we as embodied human beings, we know and have felt recently the types of emotions and attachments and beliefs that might be keeping a spirit. And if you're talking to spirit guides, let's say, or even ancestors who have been on the other side for so long that what I like to say, they've healed, right? They don't have those kinds of toxic or negative emotions or beliefs anymore. So those types of beings aren't well placed to really feel and work with someone who's recently passed over. You need someone who is really has resonated with those energies, at least in some time of their life and not that long ago. It's the whole idea of the wounded healer, right? That if you really want to be a healer, often you have to have gone through trauma or something that you healed from, because now you can truly understand what that person you're healing is going through, and then you can help. And so this is the importance of being embodied, how that allows you to reach out and heal. Someone who, in that situation, someone who has never had any trauma and has just lived a blissed out life, that's good. That's good for them. Not knocking that, but at the same time, they might not make the best healer for someone who has trauma, because they don't understand what that person's going through. So just as with the wounded healer, in the same way, you need that kind of anchored human embodied energy in order to help a spirit over to the other side, and or to heal the land even. So it's a very special place for humans in that system. And all I can hope for is that more and more people will wake up to it and start to heal their local landscape, because the landscape definitely needs it.
Absolutely. I find that if I have spirits in homes that want to transition, is that some of them will go quite easily. They just need an acknowledgement. They just want to release some emotions, because I work a lot with emotions when I clear energy beings. Some of them will come through me. I feel like they step into because I'm not I don't say I do mediumship, or I'm not a trans medium or anything, but sometimes I think we all are, but we just don't utilize the skills. Some of them will step into like my heart chakra and go up through the center of my body. And I feel that they need a physical person to release. Usually it's sadness or despair or sorrow or depression are the ones that I get. And I'm not a depressed person. I've never lived in a depressed state. But I think they feel that I can release that for them. Because you're sitting there and the tears are just, and I'm not one that cries easily. Like I'm very sort of solid person. But the tears, they need someone to release the person's emotions, whatever's holding them here. And once they come through and they go, it's like, wow, I'm really exhausted after shifting those emotions. But I find that is really relevant for some spirits. They need that physical person to release whatever the emotion is that they need to let go of that anchor that's been holding them here.
Absolutely. They can use the psychopomp or the practitioners. First off, they can take some of the energy if it's offered in order to energize what they need to do. But yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, they can use your energetic system, right? Your chakras and your internal ley lines, let's say,
Yeah.
to help them to pass up to the other side, right? Absolutely. No, it's very important. Of course, you got to protect yourself while you're doing that, right? You don't
Oh,
want negative
definitely.
energy coming in, and but it is wonderful what us humans can do for the spirits. They need us, and that's the number one thing I think, bringing things full circle, is we should not treat spirits like some pests to be eradicated, and we should treat them like other beings who need help, who need healing, who need help, who need to shed some of these emotions before they head over, or help figure things out before they go. They should not be seen as a burden. They should be seen as just another person to help on this spiritual quest.
That's absolutely right. And Eric, would you like to share with the listeners how they can contact you and find out about your courses and what you offer?
Certainly. So people can check out our website at spiritworldcenter.com. And I like to point out, center is spelled the American way, so ER at the end. I'm Canadian, so I use the RE, but it's ER. And then also they can check us out on Instagram at spirit_world_center. And then we also have the Spirit World Center podcast, of course, where we interview practitioners from all over the world about their practices and also their experiences, especially any of the really wild paranormal experiences that they've had. So those are the best places to find us. And yeah, if people are interested in training, we have one program right now that's actually specifically made for practitioners. So if you're a Reiki practitioner or tarot practitioner, you can take this course to learn how to add on to that modality, right? So if you're a tarot reader, you are already working with intuition. You're already working with your guides, let's say, to receive messages. So now we work with spirit communication to really empower that practice. Same as Reiki. I've interviewed so many Reiki practitioners on our show, and I feel it's because you enter that receptive state when you're providing Reiki. And at that point, you start receiving all these messages from your guides. And it's really, we saw this as something that Reiki people needed, because the way that Reiki is usually taught, I figure like 10-20% of people who take a Reiki course are having these experiences. But in general, you can't just go and share that with your teacher, because they have no idea what you're talking about. It's awakening your mediumistic abilities, but they have no idea how to deal
Yeah,
with that.
yeah.
So that's one of the things that we're doing. We also have a lovely course that Lauva teaches on basically empowering your soul, working with your guides to really empower your life in so many ways, to break through blockages and to find who you truly are, what you're meant to do, and to do that in a really empowered way. So that's some of the stuff we offer. Yeah.
It's been wonderful sharing your life and your experiences and how you educate people about the spirit world that's around us. Thank you for being with us today, Eric.
Oh, thank you so much, Anna, for having me on. And I hope the listenership took some positive things from this. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.